Hey y'all, Matt here with another Bible study video, and today we're going to talk about another Christmas misconception, and that is what was actually meant in Scripture when it talks about how Mary and Joseph weren't able to find room in the inn before they gave birth to baby Jesus. But before we get into this video, I just want to take a second and remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends so we can reach more people. But when we read this story, the account of the birth of Jesus, we often hear, or when we see a Christmas play, we hear about how Mary and Joseph went to Bethlehem for the census, and when they got there, they couldn't find room in the inn. And we often impose a lot of our cultural norms from today on this story, and we think of the inn as like us going to visit another town and just getting a hotel room at the Holiday Inn. And that's not what this culture during this time period would have done. They didn't have traditional hotels like we have now, especially in a small town like Bethlehem. The word that's translated in many places in the scripture is actually translated guest room in other parts of scripture, such as Mark chapter 14 verse 14 and Luke chapter 22 verse 11. And during this time period, what we often saw is if we traveled a long way in order to take part in a census such as this scenario, a lot of times you would do one of two things. You would stay with a family member that was local to that area, or maybe your friend, or a lot of times people would actually go to a common area in the town and you would be recognized as a guest. And in their culture of really high hospitality, it would have been rude for them to not invite you to their house to basically take you in for the night. And so that's more than likely what was going to happen. But during this time period, because everybody was traveling back to Bethlehem because of the census, it was probably cold. They had a hard time, for whatever reason, finding somewhere to stay. So when we look at Luke chapter 2 verse 7, more than likely when the scripture's saying that there was no room in the inn, what it's actually talking about is there's no room inside of the person's house, or the guest room inside the house of the family member, or a hospitable person they could have stayed with. There's two reasons why this could happen. It could have either already been full because other people had come to town, or something we often don't think about is that they could have been denied a room in the guest room because Mary was with child and she wasn't yet married. She was just betrothed for marriage, but her and Mary, or Joseph, actually weren't married at this time yet. So where'd the manger come from if this is more than likely a guest room in a house that's being referred to that they couldn't stay in? A lot of times in an ancient house like this, the house actually had a guest room where guests would stay, but it often had a stable adjacent to the house as well. Sometimes there would be some stairs leading into the stable room, or sometimes it was adjacent to the house, so it shared a common wall, but the door was actually accessed from the outside. And so more than likely what happened was, because there was no room in the actual guest room, Mary and Joseph probably stayed in the stable, which is where small animals like goats and chickens and stuff like that probably would have been kept when it was cold outside, to get them in from the horrible conditions outside. And this is where the manger actually comes to play, because these rooms inside their homes, because they house animals, they were designed from that. They would actually have a manger or a feeding trough in them, and this would have been perfect for a swaddled baby to be laid down in during this time. And so a lot of times we see like this portrayal of a wooden manger or some kind of a stable, but a lot of this imposes a lot of our cultural norms. More than likely it was a stable that was adjacent to a house, and this is the room that Mary and Joseph stayed in. A lot of scholars believe that this is probably the most likely thing that happened in this case. Another theory, actually, which is a little less often thought of, is that Jesus actually could have been born in a cave, which caves in that time period also were used to house animals, especially in the winter months, so that way they had some form of shelter. And the same thing. There was a feeding trough there where they could actually stay. But I hope you liked this video. I hope it was beneficial. I hope you've learned something about the birth of Jesus that you didn't know before. It may disprove a little bit of a misconception. But until the next video, I hope you have a Merry Christmas. I love you guys. Blessings.